At 11:23 p.m. on November 12, 1942, 26-year-old Virginia Hall crouched behind a stone wall in Lyon, France, watching Gestapo officers surround the safe house where 12 resistance fighters were hiding, knowing that in 47 minutes she'd either save them or watch them die in front of a Nazi firing squad. American spy, 14 months operating behind enemy lines, 0 blown cover stories, 73 agents to evacuate before dawn, or the entire French resistance network would collapse. The Gestapo had deployed 300 officers to sweep Lyon. Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, had arrived personally to oversee the operation. German intelligence knew an American spy was coordinating resistance operations. They'd intercepted coded messages. They'd tortured captured agents. They had a description: female, late 20s, walks with a limp American accent when she slips. Virginia had slipped twice that week. The telegram from London had arrived November 9th. Abort mission. Immediate extraction. Network compromised. Gestapo closing in. Return to England by any means necessary. Virginia burned the telegram. 12 agents were trapped. 6 more were awaiting supply drops. The resistance network she'd spent 14 months building would collapse if she left now. Thousands of French civilians depended on the intelligence network. Allied invasion plans required accurate German troop movements. She wasn't leaving. London didn't understand. They never did. They sat in comfortable offices sending orders to people who were dying because those orders made sense on paper but not on the ground. Virginia had watched 7 agents die following London's orders, 7 friends, 7 people who trusted British intelligence more than their own instincts. She'd learned something those 14 months. Doctrine got people killed. Following orders got people killed. The only thing that kept you alive behind enemy lines was adapting faster than the enemy could predict. And right now, the Gestapo was surrounding a safe house because German intelligence had predicted exactly where resistance fighters would hide. Standard procedure, standard safe houses, standard everything. Virginia needed to do something completely non-standard. She'd arrived in France August 1941. Official cover, American journalist writing about life in occupied France. Real mission, coordinate resistance networks, organize supply drops, establish escape routes for downed Allied pilots. British Special Operations Executive had recruited her in London. They were desperate. France was occupied. Resistance networks were fragmented. Agents were being captured faster than So could train replacements. They needed someone who could operate independently, think creatively, survive. Virginia had one qualification that made her perfect. One thing that made handlers think she'd fail, but actually made her succeed. She had a wooden leg, lost her left leg below the knee in 1930. 3 hunting accident in Turkey. Shotgun discharged while she was climbing a fence. Shattered her tibia, gangrene set in. Turkish doctors amputated. She was 27 years old. Her diplomatic career was over. State Department said disabled women couldn't serve overseas. Virginia refused to accept it, learned to walk with a prosthetic, trained herself to move normally, practiced until the limp was barely noticeable, applied to every intelligence service that would consider her. OSS hadn't been formed yet, CIA didn't exist. British SO was the only organization desperate enough to take a chance on a disabled American woman. SOSE handlers were skeptical, said the wooden leg would slow her down, said she couldn't run if Germans chased her, said prosthetics were unreliable. What if it broke behind enemy lines? What if the limp gave her away? Virginia told them the leg would be an advantage, said no one would suspect a disabled woman of being a spy, said Germans would underestimate her, said the limp would make her memorable in a good way. People would remember the disabled American journalist, not worry about what she was actually doing. So tested her. 3 months training, weapons, explosives, codes, surveillance, interrogation resistance. She excelled at everything except running, but Virginia pointed out that spies who ran were spies who got caught. Good spies never needed to run because they were never suspected in the first place. August 1941, She arrived in Vichy, France with press credentials and a mission to organize chaos into networks. France was fragmented. Resistance groups didn't trust each other. Communists wouldn't work with Gaullists. Urban networks ignored rural ones. Everyone had different objectives, different methods, different leaders who refused to cooperate. Virginia's job was making them cooperate whether they wanted to or not. She started in Lyon, industrial city, strategic location. German supply lines ran through it, resistance presence, but no coordination. She identified leaders, established contact, proposed cooperation frameworks. The French didn't trust her. American woman with a wooden leg claiming to coordinate resistance. Obvious trap, German plant, Gestapo provocateur. Virginia proved herself the hard way. November 1941, German patrol arrested a resistance courier carrying coded messages. The courier would break under torture, would reveal names, would destroy the entire network. Virginia needed to extract him before he talked. The courier was being held at Gestapo headquarters in Lyon Fortress. Guards everywhere. Impossible to break into. Virginia didn't break in. She walked in the front door, dressed as a nun, habit, rosary, perfect French with a regional accent. Told the guards she was there to provide spiritual counsel to prisoners, said the bishop had sent her. Said even enemies of the Reich deserve God's mercy before execution. The guards were Catholic. They let her in. Virginia found the courier. He'd been beaten, 2 fingers broken, face swollen, but he hadn't talked yet. She told him she was American intelligence, told him to confess everything to her in French, make it look like religious confession. He did. She absolved him, made the sign of the cross. Then she told the guards the prisoner had repented and requested last rites before execution, said she'd return tomorrow with proper sacraments. The guards agreed. That night, Virginia organized a prison transfer, forged documents claiming the courier was being moved to a different facility for further interrogation. Resistance fighters dressed as German soldiers. They arrived at Gestapo headquarters, presented the transfer orders, took custody of the prisoner, drove away. By the time Germans realized the transfer was fake, the courier was in a safe house 60 kilometers away. The French resistance stopped doubting Virginia. If this story is pulling you in, think about how far you'd go to prove yourself when everyone doubts you. When the system says you are not good enough because of something beyond your control, would you walk into enemy headquarters disguised as a nun? Would you risk everything to show them they were wrong? If that kind of courage speaks to you, let us know you are here. Drop a comment, tell us where you are watching from. You are part of keeping these stories alive. Between November 1941 and October 1942, Virginia organized 12 resistance networks across central France, 600 active members, 2,000 auxiliaries. They sabotaged railways, destroyed supply depots, gathered intelligence on German troop movements, organized escape routes for Allied pilots shot down over France. She operated from Lyon using multiple cover identities: American journalist, Belgian refugee, French widow. She changed appearances constantly, dyed her hair, changed clothes, adjusted her walk to make the limp more or less noticeable depending on the identity. The wooden leg became her signature trick. She called it Cuthbert, named it, talked about it, made it part of her legend. When Germans asked about her limp, she had a dozen stories: childhood accident, war injury, disease. The stories changed, but the leg was always visible, always explained, always making her seem harmless. Because who would send a disabled spy into occupied France? It was illogical. It was stupid. It was exactly what made her effective. German intelligence never suspected her until June 1942. A captured resistance fighter broke under torture, revealed information about the American woman coordinating networks. Klaus Barbie started investigating. The Butcher of Lyon, Gestapo commander, specialist in hunting resistance fighters, Barbie was methodical. He analyzed patterns. He studied resistance operations. He identified coordination points. and he realized someone was connecting everything. Someone smart. Someone who understood German procedures well enough to avoid them. He started looking for the coordinator, female. American walks with a limp. London sent the abort message September 19th. Said Gestapo was closing in. Said Virginia's identity was compromised. Said extract immediately before capture. Virginia refused. She had agents in the field. Had operations in progress, had people depending on her. She wasn't abandoning them because London was nervous. She changed tactics instead. Stopped using safe houses Gestapo might know about. Stopped meeting agents in predictable locations. Stopped following any pattern that could be analyzed. She'd learned something about German intelligence. They were excellent at pattern recognition. They could track anyone who followed predictable behavior. But they struggled with chaos, with people who refused to establish patterns, with agents who operated on instinct instead of doctrine. Virginia became unpredictable behavior. She met agents in random locations, changed her schedule constantly, never slept in the same place twice, never took the same route, never did anything the same way twice. It worked until November 12th. One of her agents was captured carrying a message that mentioned a meeting, time, location, attendees. The agent died under torture without revealing details, but Gestapo had the message. They knew 12 resistance fighters would be at a specific safe house in Lyon. They surrounded it at 10:30 p.m. 300 Gestapo officers. Barbie commanded personally. He wanted the American woman, wanted her alive for interrogation, wanted to break her in front of captured resistance fighters, wanted to use her as an example. Virginia was 3 blocks away when she heard about the raid. A street contact warned her, said Gestapo was everywhere, said they were waiting for someone, said Barbie was there personally. She understood immediately. The safe house was compromised. 12 agents were trapped. Gestapo would wait for her to attempt rescue. Then they'd capture everyone. Standard doctrine said abort, said you couldn't save captured agents, said trying would get you killed too, said one spy wasn't worth 12 resistance fighters. Virginia had watched 7 agents die following doctrine. She wasn't losing 12 more. She studied the situation. Gestapo had surrounded the building, 300 officers, overwhelming force, impossible to fight through, impossible to sneak past, impossible to extract 12 people without being detected, so she didn't try to be subtle. She went to the Lyon Fire Department, told them a building was on fire 4 blocks from the safe house, said she'd seen smoke, said people might be trapped. French firefighters responded immediately. They drove toward the location, sirens blaring, lights flashing. Gestapo officers saw the fire trucks coming, assumed there was a real emergency, moved vehicles to let firefighters through, maintained their perimeter but focused attention on the arriving trucks. Virginia used the distraction. She'd positioned resistance fighters around the perimeter while Gestapo watched the fire trucks. Resistance fighters created chaos. Threw stones through windows, started fights, set off fireworks, created multiple disturbances simultaneously. Gestapo responded to each disturbance, split their forces, tried to maintain control. But 300 officers couldn't cover every angle while responding to chaos. Virginia entered the safe house through a basement entrance Gestapo hadn't discovered, found the 12 resistance fighters, told them they had maybe 5 minutes before Gestapo realized the fire call was fake, led them through the basement, into the sewers, underground passages that connected to a building 2 blocks away. They emerged in a butcher shop Virginia had prepared as an alternate safe house. Gestapo was still surrounding the original building when Virginia and 12 agents disappeared into Lyon's underground. Barbie realized what happened at midnight. The safe house was empty. The American woman had extracted 12 people from a building surrounded by 300 Gestapo officers. He put out orders, find her, find all of them, checkpoints everywhere, raids throughout Lyon, sweeps of known resistance locations. Virginia knew she had maybe 6 hours before the net closed completely. She split the 12 agents into groups, sent them to different safe houses, activated emergency extraction protocols, got messages to London, requested emergency pickup. SOE arranged a Lysander flight, single-engine aircraft, could land in fields, could extract agents under darkness, scheduled for November 14th, field 30 kilometers from Lyon. Virginia had 48 hours to get 12 agents through German checkpoints to an extraction point, while the entire Gestapo force in central France was hunting her. She divided the agents into 4 groups, gave each group different routes, different cover stories, different timing. She would travel with the most vulnerable group, the ones Gestapo was most likely to identify. November 13th, they traveled by bicycle. Safest method, cars required checkpoints, trains required papers. Bicycles allowed flexibility, they could use back roads, could avoid main routes, could split up if Germans appeared. Virginia's group encountered a checkpoint at 2 p.m. German soldiers stopped everyone, checked papers, asked questions. They were looking for resistance fighters, looking for the American woman with a limp Virginia had prepared. She wore peasant clothing, spoke French with a regional accent, carried vegetables in a basket. Her wooden leg was hidden under long skirts. She'd practiced walking to minimize the limp. The German soldier checked her papers, asked where she was going. She said visiting family in the next village, showed him the vegetables, said she was bringing food. Simple, plausible, boring. The soldier noticed her walking carefully, asked if she was injured. Virginia said old injury. Didn't elaborate. The soldier didn't press. He waved her through. 3 agents in her group weren't as lucky. Their papers were questionable. Germans detained them for further investigation. Virginia had to leave them, continuing forward, maintaining cover, getting the others to extraction. She hated it, hated leaving people behind, hated that survival meant abandoning anyone who slowed you down. But that is how you stayed alive in occupied France. You saved who you could. You moved forward. You didn't stop. November 14th, 10:47 p.m. Virginia and 7 agents reached the extraction field. Open farmland, no cover, exposed, dangerous. The Lysander would land at 11:30. 43 minutes, German patrols were active. They'd increased sweeps after the Lyon incident. Virginia's group heard vehicles, saw searchlights. The Germans were close. The Lysander landed at 11:29. Pilot kept the engine running, said he had 3 minutes before German patrols would hear the aircraft. Get in now or stay behind. Virginia counted her group. 7 agents, 1 pilot's seat. The Lysander could carry 3 passengers maximum, 4 in an emergency. She made the decision in seconds. 4 agents boarded. 3 stayed behind, including Virginia. Someone had to guide the remaining agents to alternate extraction. Someone had to maintain the network. Someone had to stay. Virginia stayed. The Lysander departed at 11:32. German searchlights swept the field 90 seconds later. Virginia and 2 agents were already gone, melted into darkness, into fields, into the French countryside that had hidden resistance fighters for 2 years. London recalled Virginia officially in January 1943, said her cover was completely blown, said Gestapo had her description, her methods, her networks, said staying in France was suicide. Virginia agreed to leave but refused to stop. If France was too dangerous, she'd operate somewhere else. She requested assignment to Spain, or Italy, or anywhere the war needed someone who could organize chaos into networks. SOE sent her back to London for reassignment. She arrived February 1943, 14 months behind enemy lines, 73 agents evacuated, 12 networks established, 0 blown operations that she couldn't recover. The Office of Strategic Services recruited her immediately, OSS, American Intelligence. They just formed. They needed experienced agents. Virginia was perfect. She knew France, knew resistance operations, knew how to survive behind enemy lines. OSS trained her for 6 months. New techniques, new equipment, new mission. She'd return to France, not as a journalist, as a radio operator, deep cover, long-term assignment, support the invasion. She argued, said Gestapo knew her face, said returning to France was obvious suicide. OSS agreed, that is why she'd operate in rural areas. That is why she'd change her appearance completely. That is why she'd become someone else. Virginia Hall became Marcel Montagne, French peasant, elderly, worked as a milkmaid, lived in rural Haute-Loire. No one would suspect an old peasant woman of being an American spy. She changed everything, dyed her hair grey, wore peasant clothing, learned to walk like an elderly woman, hunched slow, making her limp look like arthritis rather than prosthetic. She became invisible. Another old French woman in occupied France. Unremarkable, forgettable. She returned to France March 1944, 3 months before D-Day. Her mission: organize resistance support for the invasion, identify German positions, coordinate sabotage operations, prepare the region for Allied advance. She operated from a farm in Haute-Loire, kept a radio hidden in the barn, transmitted intelligence to London every night. German direction: finding units were active, hunting radio operators. Virginia never transmitted from the same location twice. She moved the radio constantly, field, barn, forest, abandoned buildings, never predictable, never pattern-based. The Germans came close twice. June 4th direction: finding unit traced her signal to within 2 kilometers. German soldiers swept the area. Virginia had already moved. Radio hidden. She was milking cows when Germans searched the farm. They saw an old peasant woman. Asked about suspicious activity. She said nothing unusual. Soldiers left. June 6th, D-Day. Allied invasion began. Virginia's mission expanded. Organize guerrilla operations behind German lines. Disrupt retreat routes. Destroy communications. Support Allied advance. She coordinated 1,500 resistance fighters across central France. They cut railway lines, destroyed bridges, ambushed German convoys, created chaos behind German lines, made retreat impossible, made German forces easy targets for advancing allies. The Germans never caught her, never identified Marcel Montagne as Virginia Hall, never realized the old peasant woman milking cows was the American spy they'd hunted. For 2 years, France was liberated August 1944. Virginia had been operating behind enemy lines for 36 months total, first as a journalist, then as a peasant, always as a spy who refused to follow doctrine that got people killed. After the war, OSS wanted to award her the Distinguished Service Cross. Second Heikest military decoration, recognize her service. Virginia refused public ceremony, said she didn't want publicity, didn't want recognition, didn't want her name in newspapers. President Truman presented the award privately, September 1945. Oval Office, no press, no photographs. Virginia received the medal, thanked the president, left, returned to normal life. Never spoke publicly about her service. She joined CIA when it formed in 1947, worked intelligence analysis, desk job. She wanted field work. CIA said she was too old, too recognizable, too famous among intelligence communities. She was 41 years old, fought harder than men half her age, survived longer than agents with years more training. But CIA said desk work she accepted. Spent 15 years analyzing intelligence reports written by agents who'd never operated behind enemy lines. She retired 1966, age 60, 31 years in intelligence, 14 months behind enemy lines. Changed how resistance networks operated, proved disabled agents could outperform able-bodied ones, showed that creativity mattered more than doctrine. Nobody knew, nobody cared. France awarded her the Croix de Guerre, Britain gave her an MBE, American military gave her the Distinguished Service Cross, all presented quietly, all classified, all forgotten by everyone except the intelligence communities that understood what she'd accomplished. Virginia Hall died July 8, 1982. She was 76 years old. Obituaries mentioned her wartime service briefly. American spy. Operated in France. Awarded medals. No stories. No stories. No recognition of what she'd actually done. The full story remained classified until 2007, 25 years after her death. CIA declassified her files. Historians started researching. Books appeared. Documentaries followed. Suddenly Virginia Hall was famous, posthumously. Today her wooden leg is displayed at the CIA Museum, Cuthbert. The prosthetic that made her famous, the disability that handlers thought would end her career, the thing that made her the perfect spy because no one suspected a disabled woman could be dangerous. Her medals are there too. Distinguished Service Cross. Croix de Guerre. MBE, symbols of a career that remained secret for 60 years, proof that the most effective intelligence officer of World War II was someone doctrine said shouldn't exist. That is how history actually works. The people who change everything are the ones institutions try to exclude. The disabled woman who became the Gestapo's most wanted spy, the agent who survived longer than anyone because she refused to follow doctrine that got people killed. The person who proved that creativity and courage matter more than physical ability or institutional approval. Virginia Hall walked into occupied France with a wooden leg and 14 months later walked out having built networks that helped liberate a nation. She returned in disguise and did it again, and almost nobody knew her name until decades after she died. But you do now. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do something about it. Share it. Tell someone who needs to hear that disability doesn't define capability, that the people institutions exclude are often the ones who change history, that courage matters more than following rules, your voice matters. Use it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for remembering Virginia Hall. Thank you for being part of keeping these forgotten heroes alive.